Okay, so maybe you got a little lost in the hairiness of the code in the last problem, and that is totally understandable. I want to show you a tool that will help you with that and also help you find errors in your code as you move on. What I'm about to show you is the Firefox debugger. What that debugger does is it allows you to go through your code line by line by line. So all I have done is I've opened in Live Server into my Firefox. This is my file. If I reload the page, um, then I get the prompt, letter grade for class one, we'll say and A, and then it gives us our GPA. So exactly where we were in the last video. So all I'm going to do now is I want to open the debugger console. If you are on a Mac, you'll hit Command Option I. If you're on a Windows, you'll hit Control Shift I. So I'm going to say Control Shift I, and it pops up this tool. What we're going to do is we're going to click on this debugger tab. So it may have opened to the console tab, the network tab. We're going to go to the debugger tab. And you should see a file that looks quite familiar. In fact, you'll recognize your code right here. So what I'm going to show you is you can put a breakpoint. So what you're going to do is you're going to bring your mouse over these lines, and everywhere that the line has a different color, like a filled in white, or it might be a different color scheme on your computer, is where you can put a breakpoint. What a breakpoint does is it stops the code and says, hang on, pause. I want to take charge of how the execution goes from here on out. So I'm going to put one on line 16. So in order for these to work, you got to start your script. The way we start this script is we reload the page. So we're going to reload the page and it's going to pause. And we're going to create a counter variable. So it says the highlighted portion is what is going to run next. So you'll notice the little blue arrow is pointing at this 0. In other words, if we look over here, we can see the counter is uninitialized, meaning it doesn't have any values. This is under scopes, under block. It says counter is uninitialized. If we hit If we come over here, there's two buttons. There's the step into and the step over. We're going to choose step into. In a later video, I'll explain, in a couple weeks, I'll explain what the step into function does. But we'll say step into, and it will step in. And now it's run that step. So where it was highlighted over here and counter was undefined, now counter has been set to 0, which is exactly what we'd expect if we had a statement that said let counter equal 0. We'd assume that running that line of code would make counter 0. Now it's highlighting the next portion. It's going to see if 0 is less than 4. 0 is less than 4, so it's going to run this loop. So we'll hit that step into button or F11. And now it's about to run this next line of code. If we hover over letter grade, it's not defined yet. And if we look over here, it's uninitialized. But if we hit the next button, it runs our prompt. And it's going to run a prompt that says, what is the letter grade for class? Counter is 0 plus 1. So we should see what is your letter grade for class 1. If we hit the next button, it says, what is your letter grade for class 1? I'm going to put a B plus here and hit OK. So now it says that letter grade is B plus. It was uninitialized, but now it's a B plus. GPA is still uninitialized, but when we hit the next button, it's going to run this line of code. So let's hit that next button and boom, GPA is now 0. We can see GPA is 0 and letter grade is B plus. Now it starts our if statement. It's going to see if letter grade is equal to A. B plus is not equal to A, so we should expect it to skip straight to line 24 and run that check next. So we'll hit the next button and it jumps to line 24. And it says letter grade B plus equals A minus. It does not, so we should expect it to jump to line 27. We hit next, and sure enough, it jumps to line 27. Now we're going to see if letter grade equals B plus. So B plus equals B plus. It does, so now we're going to expect it to go to line 28 and run that letter grade. So we hit next. Now we're on line 28. Right now, GPA is still 0 because we set it up above. Right here, we set it to 0. But here, we're about to set it to 3.3. So we see it's 0 right now. Once we hit the next button, we've finished evaluating this if statement. We don't need to check any of the others because we already know that B plus is B plus. So we're going to skip down to line 57. So we'll hit next. It skips to line 57. If we hover over GPA, we can see it's 3.3. If we hover over total GPA right now, it's 0 because we haven't entered any classes. So now we're going to store total GPA. Total GPA is going to be 0 plus whatever's in GPA, 3.3. So if we hit next and we hover over total GPA, it's 3.3. We also happened to hit the end of the loop, so it jumped right back up to the top. Now you'll notice the highlighter is over this counter plus plus. So if counter is 0 and plus plus increments it, then we should expect counter to change to 1. So we'll hit that next statement, and now counter is 1. And now we're going to see if 1 is less than 4. 1 is less than 4, so we should expect this loop to start again. We'll drop into the loop. Um, Letter grade is uninitialized, GPA uninitialized. We're going to say, what is your grade for class 2? Because we knew that counter was 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. We'll put an A so you can see that in action. Um, so now our letter grade is an A, and our GPA is still uninitialized, but if we hit next, now our GPA is set to 0, and our letter grade is set to A. If letter grade is A, then we expect line 22 to run. If we hover over letter grade, it is in fact A. So we'll drop down and we'll run 4.0 and drop to the end. At this point, we've now run our loop 2 times. We're about to increment the GPA. It's going to go from 3.3 to 3.3 plus 4, so that should be like 7.3. But we know that our loop is working. So when you're debugging your code and you've established that a block of code is working and maybe it runs multiple times, if you are done debugging it, you can remove the breakpoint and come to the next block of code you want to analyze. In my case, I want to just start at right here because I want to make sure that my math works, that I will be getting the right GPA. So then once you've done that, you can hit this resume button and that'll run the code normally. So it's going to say, what is your letter grade for class 3? We're going to put a C minus and hit OK. And you'll notice it didn't pause and it went immediately to class 4. So what is your letter grade for class 4? We'll give ourselves another A. And now it pauses. Total GPA is now 13 because that's the GPA you got in each class. And now we're averaging it to get your actual GPA because that's a grade point average. So in order to get that, we have to divide it by the number of classes that you took, which is 4. So we'll take 13 and we'll divide it by 4. And if we hit the next button, now our total GPA is 3.25. So we know that math works now. And now we've gotten to our if statement. In future programs that you're writing, you may want to test some of your if statements. And right now, our GPA is 3.25. And while it's relatively easy to figure out what letter grades you need to get to figure out each of these conditions, sometimes it's going to be a little harder. So what I'm going to show you how to do is called forcing a condition. Let's say we actually really wanted to check that this first if statement is working. Our total GPA needs to be greater than or equal to 3.3. Let's say we really want to test if that equal part works. Like, what if we have exactly 3.3? Which of these conditions is it going to evaluate? Well, problematically, our GPA is 3.25 after all of those calculations. But because we have the power of the debugger and we've paused the code, it actually hasn't run line 63 yet. So what we can do is we can come to our console and we can say total GPA equals, and then we can set it to what we want. So we wanted to see if what happens when total GPA is 3.3. So we'll say total GPA equals 3.3 and we'll hit enter. Now when we come back to our debugger and we hover over it, total GPA is 3.3. Now when it evaluates this line, even though our entire calculation before came out to 3.25, we said throw that out the window, set it to 3.3. So now that it's set to 3.3, we can see if 3.3 is greater than or equal to 3.3, then run line 64. We'll hit next, and because we've now forced a condition to take place, we can now make sure that this part of our if statement works. So now we're going to alert that your GPA is 3.3, great job, and then continue on with the rest of that alert. So we'll hit the next button. It says your GPA is 3.3, and we've successfully forced a condition. So now we'll hit OK. So that's really helpful for when you're wanting to test why something isn't working. You're like, maybe I need to test a very unique input, and I don't want to figure out how to get that input by the time we get halfway down the program. And so you can wait till you get halfway down the program and then change the value, and then you can test your code accordingly. All right, so when you hit next, it'll drop all the way to the bottom of the script tag, and you'll see all this comments that we had in there. Now, if you were running this without live server, then your code would have just ended. Because you're running it with live server puts some of their own JavaScript in here, and that's this stuff, and it's complicated, and don't look at it. You don't need to. I mean, you can if you want to, but you are good to go from this point. So you can just hit continue, and then you'll see your HTML page like you normally would. And that is how you use the Firefox debugger.